Trump is awesome.
Mr. Reagan.
75 historic Donald Trump achievements. Now, depending on how you count them, Trump has had hundreds, maybe even thousands of astonishing achievements since taking office. When your liberal friends tell you that Trump has destroyed the country, refer them to this video, or just memorize a couple of these amazing accomplishments. Now, the first two I want to point out are general ones. Trump has incidentally accomplished two amazing things in office just by being Trump. First of all, Trump has exposed the fake news media. Trump exposed the mainstream media as the biased, partisan hacks that they are. Now, the news media has always leaned left. They've been leaning more and more left over the years. Recently, they've done away with journalistic ethics completely, and they started shilling totally for the left politically. Until Trump emerged as the 2016 Republican candidate, however, the mainstream media was still trying to hide their extreme bias. After Trump, though, their bias became so transparent that reporters now openly acknowledge that the mainstream media is completely biased to the left. More importantly, the media will do anything to promote their leftist agenda, even lie blatantly to their audience. Most Americans don't really care that the media leans left, but it does care about being lied to. And every time the left-wing media is exposed for actively trying to deceive the American public, more and more people wake up. They get red-pilled and they shift to the right politically. So Trump has achieved a lot here, but in truth, he couldn't have done it without the help of the fake news media actually being the fake news media. Secondly, Trump has inspired many Americans to take an active interest in politics. Trump is divisive, as the media keeps telling us. But that's not really on him, though. Trump is divisive because the fake news mainstream media lies to their viewers about him. Honestly, Trump would be the most unifying president in history if the media were honest about him. So it's not really Trump dividing America. But whatever the reason, Trump has indeed become a divisive character. And you might think that this is utterly bad. But in fact, I would beg to differ. People might be inspired by him to jump into politics to fight against him, but what I found is that often a politically uneducated person will jump into politics, learn all they can about what's going on, and then quickly realize that Trump is not that bad after all. It's just the reporting on him that's bad. And then they shift to the right, as I mentioned before. So I think that eventually most people who are inspired to educate themselves about politics will become conservative. Now, we often forget Trump's achievements because there are just so many. Some of these are so impressive, they're almost too good to believe, and yet all true. Now, we'll get into all of this in one moment, but first, I have to sell you something. What happens to our economy if Joe Biden is elected in November? Okay, I don't think that's actually going to happen, but you never know. And even with Trump in office, what's the US dollar going to look like once we tally the debt accumulated in the fight against coronavirus? Uncertainty is the enemy of investors and savers alike. Now is the time to educate yourself and protect your finances. Did you know that it took nearly 8 years for the markets to recover after the 2008 housing bubble crash? Yet, during the crash of 2008, gold and silver surged to all-time highs. Do you really have 8 years to wait for a recovery? Several Americans use a little-known IRS-qualified loophole that allows Americans to buy gold and silver with their retirement accounts. And the good guys at Orion Metal Exchange offer a no-fee transfer in as little as 2 days on most accounts. Bank of America and Citigroup all see gold soaring, forecasting $2,000 and even $3,000 an ounce for gold, respectively. Some experts are calling for gold to double in the next year. Orion Metal Exchange is a Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer. At Orion, you get more precious metals for your money. Call today or request a free investment kit below. Mention the Mr. Reagan YouTube channel and get a free 1-ounce silver coin for qualified retirement account owners. You must be over 40 to qualify. Call 866-915-5053 and get your free investment guide today. At Orion, you get more precious metals for your money every day. The left claims that Trump is a disaster, but he's been just the opposite. The Marxist philosophy of the left really would destroy the country. Trump, on the other hand, has accomplished so many things that we routinely forget many of them. All right, there are actually 75 of these, so let's dive in. The Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act, making animal cruelty a federal crime. Now, vegans ought to love Trump for this. Space Force. I don't think people quite understand the critical importance of our satellite network. A significant and ever-growing chunk of our military battles will be fought remotely in the future, and remote navigation requires satellites, not to mention thousands of other critical aspects of communication and navigation. The nation that controls the satellite networks has a huge military advantage. In 2020, Space Force is utterly critical. Would Barack Obama have established a new arm of the military? I highly doubt it. This is another big win for President Trump. Reparations to the Spokane Indian tribe, funding of a Native American language program, U.S. recognition to the Little Shell tribe of Montana. American Indians have got to love Trump for this. Funny that you don't hear that much about it, though. You know why? Because Republicans don't do things in order to get votes. Republicans do things because they think it's the right thing to do. Though violent crime rose during the last 2 years of the Obama presidency, they have dropped every year Trump's been in office. That will certainly change because Democrat politicians let all the violent criminals out of prison, and Black Lives Matter decided to go on a freaking unrestricted rampage through Democrat-controlled cities. But otherwise, Trump's presidency reduced violent crime. Trump made CBD and hemp legal. Trump's EPA fixed the water infrastructure problem in Flint. Remember when everybody was losing their minds because Flint, Michigan's public water was utterly contaminated? That was all over the news. Yeah, so Trump's EPA fixed that. What, you didn't hear about the fix? Well, of course not. Why would the mainstream media cover any Trump success ever? You'll always hear about the problem, never Trump's successful resolution. The U.S. is now the #1 producer of crude oil in the world. Why? Because of Donald Trump. Trump signed a law giving pharmacies the legal right to properly advise patients on how to save money on prescriptions. No joke. Probably didn't hear about that one either. Trump signed FOSTA and SESTA, laws that help fight sex trafficking. Trump provided airport spaces for breastfeeding moms. Last November, the 25% lowest paid Americans got a 4.5% income boost because of the Trump economy. On average, corporations have increased entry-level pay because of the Trump economy. Trump designated 1.3 million acres as wilderness, expanded the national parks, and added 5 national monuments. Not sure I like that one, but EnviroNuts should love him for this. Trump designated $10 million per year to clean plastic and garbage from the ocean. Trump deregulated prescription drug imports from Canada to increase competition and lower prices. Incidentally, drug prices have dropped 11% under Donald Trump. Healthcare providers must disclose costs of services so Americans can comparison shop. Finally, because of Donald Trump. Hospitals also must disclose standard charges for services. Finally, because of Donald Trump. Trump totally fixed the Veterans Administration. That is a big one. Huge. Federal workers now get 12 weeks paid parental leave because of Donald Trump. I don't like it, but feminists should love Trump for that. 200,000 uninsured Americans get free HIV prevention drugs for 11 years because of Trump. Small businesses can now collectively bargain for insurance because of Donald Trump. The First Step Act aims to help Black Americans in the judicial system, and I'm not a fan of race-based legislation, but Black Lives Matter should love Trump for that. Trump increased funding for historically Black colleges by 14%. Biggest mistake of his presidency, I think, but again, Black Lives Matter should love him for that. Funny how none of this kind of legislation stopped the race riots. It's almost like Black Lives Matter and Antifa can't be appeased. Poverty fell to 11.8%, one of the lowest numbers in American history, and the drop in poverty was the absolute lowest ever for Blacks and Hispanic Americans, and this was in large part because of Donald Trump. Trump's economy inspired consumer confidence to grow to an astonishing all-time high in America. Trump facilitated the growth of 7 million jobs, and more Americans were employed than ever before in American history under Donald Trump's presidency. This was all, of course, before it was all devastated by the stupid coronavirus. But extra achievement, this progress will all return once again in Trump's second term. Trump ordered a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality in every country in the world. The gays gotta love Trump for that. Trump increased funding for school choice by $42 million. And Trump signed legislation to allow families to use 529 college savings plans for elementary and secondary education. These are probably my favorite things personally because school choice is utterly critical to taking back our country from the Marxist influence of the left. Trump defeated ISIS. Trump issued an executive order prohibiting the government from discriminating against Christians. It's despicable that this was needed at all, but we live in strange times. This is another one of my favorite things that Trump has done. Trump signed an executive order to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. Jewish Americans should love Trump for this. Trump halted all U.S. tax money to international organizations that fund or perform abortions. Trump imposed sanctions on Marxist Venezuela. Trump signed a new, excellent trade deal with South Korea. Trump signed an improved energy export deal to Europe. The withdrawal from the potentially disastrous TPP deal. $12 billion trade deal with Vietnam, $250 billion trade deal with China, $12 billion in aid to American farmers. Trump has freed over a dozen U.S. hostages. He's building the wall. Trump's Ready to Work initiative gives ex-cons a second chance. Trump's opportunity zones incentivize an estimated $100 billion in long-term investment in low-income communities across the country. This has partially been nullified by Black Lives Matter rioters, but nevertheless, Trump did an amazing thing here. Trump ended Common Core. Trump signed the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. Trump funded veteran suicide prevention programs. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, signed by Donald Trump, brought over $1 trillion in business investment back into the U.S. from overseas. Before coronavirus messed everything up, the Trump economy had a myriad of amazing effects. Median household income hit record highs. The stock market hit record highs. Manufacturing jobs grew faster than they had in 30 years. Americans had the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded. Black unemployment, Hispanic unemployment, and Asian American unemployment were all at all-time lows. Women's unemployment was at a 65-year low. Youth unemployment was at a 50-year low. Trump deregulated more than any other American president ever. That's another favorite of mine. Trump signed a welfare reform bill requiring able-bodied adults to look for work if they're on welfare. The FDA approved more affordable generic drugs than ever before in history under Donald Trump. Medicare reform has stopped hospitals from overcharging low-income seniors, saving hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. Trump's right to try legislation provides terminally ill patients with access to experimental treatments. This one is truly amazing and absolutely wonderful. $6 billion to fight the opioid epidemic. Opioid, that is a difficult word to say. The U.S. became a natural gas exporter for the first time since 1957 under Donald Trump. Trump forced NATO to pay their actual commitments for the first time in decades by threatening to withdraw from NATO completely. Trump withdrew from the total joke that is the Paris Climate Accord. I personally love this. Trump has had 2 Supreme Court justices confirmed. Trump moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Trump signed a new and improved trade deal with Mexico and Canada that is much more favorable to U.S. interests. Trump imposed tough tariffs on China in response to their unscrupulous intellectual property theft and other nefarious activities against the United States. Trump signed childhood cancer research legislation, which will lead to improved treatments for these awful diseases. Trump allocated $1.8 billion to help people with autism. Trump allocated $19 million in funding for lupus research. The TRACE Act should help end dreaded telemarketing. Maybe that's not as serious as cancer, but it is really annoying. And Donald Trump did this stuff all while deep state actors were working against him, while the mainstream media lied about him daily to the public, and during an illegitimate investigation and impeachment. Amazing. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much. That isn't so. Good night.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. There's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty.